Hello, viewers, and welcome to the Shunned Experience channel. It is an absolute honour to have Riley from the Jexit 2020 channel today. We're going to be interviewing him and sort of discussing also the evolution of the organisation of Jehovah's Witnesses. It's an absolute pleasure to get you on, Riley. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Obviously, we stumbled across each other's channel, and I've obviously appeared on your channel, and I was very keen to get you on. If we could start the discussion by just sort of going back to your earliest memories as a Jehovah's Witness and your earliest exposure to the organisation, when was that?
Well, so my mother was contacted on the ministry. So she was at home and a JW knocked on her door and witnessed to her, and then they started a Bible study. I was 2 years old at the time. I do actually remember, I know it sounds strange because I was only 2, but I do have some, memories, like just pictures in my head of this woman coming to study the Bible with my mum. And that continued for the next 4 years. And then she got baptized when I was 6 years old. So from then on, I was raised as a witness. My dad wasn't a witness at the time. He did become a witness years later, many years later. But yeah, I by and large had a witness upbringing from the age of about, before the age of 6. I do have some vague memories of one Christmas and one birthday, but that's about it.
Yeah,
I'm practically born in.
So the majority of your childhood, yeah, like you said, practically born in. The majority of your childhood is spent in the organisation, and most of your memories are surrounded by that. Yeah. So did you go to public school?
Yeah, I went to primary school in South London. I did have a few difficulties as a witness, not being able to celebrate birthdays and Christmas and stuff like that, but they didn't really bother me too much. Mm-hmm. I don't remember feeling an overwhelming sense of missing out or anything like that. To be fair, my mum was very good at compensating for those things. So I mean, I can't speak for my siblings, but me personally, I did appreciate that, and I didn't ever. I don't recall ever feeling that I missed out on, Christmas and birthdays and all of that. Yeah.
So when did you decide to get baptized? Did you get baptized at a young age?
Yes, I got baptized at 13 years old.
That's quite a common theme among Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. To me, it just felt like the next step, like the next thing to do.
Yeah.
And being completely honest, I am, deep down inside, I am a people pleaser, mm-hmm. which can be a good and a bad thing.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Especially when you're young and you have all of these, you feel you have all of these expectations on you. Mm-hmm. I felt that's what was expected of me, so that's what I did. It was the next step, so I got baptized.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally relate to that because I got baptized at 12, so a very similar age, and it was a very similar thought process for me as well. It was, like you said, it's that next step. I did it because it's what's expected of me.
Yeah.
But it's the mindset of that, but you never really understand the implications of teachings or policies such as shunning, do you, later on in life? No. You just want to please your parents. And I think you get, I mean, I don't know about yourself, but you get a bit of pressure to get baptized amongst others in the congregation. Being a born-in, you kind of expect it, aren't you, to keep the family tradition going.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what were your experiences like as a youth in the organisation?
It was, I'd say it was quite positive, from like the social aspect. Mm-hmm. The social aspect. I mean, I did have a good group of friends as a witness. Shortly after I got baptized, the congregation I was in grew too large, so it had to divide. So half of that congregation, half of a nearby congregation combined and formed an entirely new congregation. And my social world really opened up then. You know, there were a lot more young people in that congregation than in my previous one. And it was a lot of fun. You know, we really enjoyed each other's company. We hung out, got into trouble occasionally. But I mean, trouble according to witness standards.
Yes, yeah.
You know, not real trouble.
No, not spending time inside or committing crimes, etc. It's
no, nothing like that.
What normal kids would deem as fun. It's trouble in witness standards.
Exactly. So looking back on that, I had a quite a fun youth. As a witness, but my difficulties came when I left school and went to college, and that was just a whole different ball game. That's when I started to feel that I was missing out on certain things, and I started having much closer association with my college mates than I did with my schoolmates when I was at school.
What was it like living at home then? Would you say that your mum put a lot of pressure on you to sort of be in the center of the congregation? Were you quite a spiritual family, or, you know, was she quite, I don't think loose is the right word, but did she allow you to have certain freedoms, or was she very regimented in the way she raised you into the organization?
No, my mum wasn't strict. She was firm, but she understood that we were young and we were kids and we wanted to have fun. And I'd say all in all, she was very balanced. There were times where I felt that she was being a little bit unreasonable, but that's not something that would characterize her parenting style as. My dad was the real strict, authoritarian, disciplinarian one. But he didn't become a witness until I was about 14, maybe. That's when he got baptized. But then not long after that, I'd say about 2 years after that, my parents split up. My parents separated around about the time that I was leaving school and starting college. So when I actually started college, I found that I had way more freedom than I did when I was at school. And that kind of facilitated me having closer association with the kids at college. Whereas when I was at school, it wasn't like that. It was like, go to school as soon as school finishes, go straight home. Whereas I was at college, and I was a little bit older as well, but when I was at college, it wasn't like that. So I was like hanging out with my friends at college till all hours of the morning.
So what kind of impact did that have on you by associating with what we deem now as normal people? Did it sort of play on your mind and think, you know, you wish you could be normal, essentially? Did you feel different?
Very much. I started seeing what people's lives were like outside of the organization and seeing it firsthand. And there were a lot of things that my friends at college did that I found fun, you know, and I wanted to do those things as well. And I went to a boys' school, but the college I went to obviously was mixed, and, you know, attractive girls all over the place. You know, it was intriguing.
It's an incredible amount of mental pressure, isn't it, being a youngster in the truth, with the social pressures. You know, kids are growing up, you know, you can see kids, you know, having boyfriends and girlfriends around. You've got the Christmas and birthdays element to, you know, to battle with. Kids don't like what's different, do they? You know, I mean, I got bullied a little bit in my early years at school. It got a bit easier as I got older. But from that transition then from, you know, leaving school to sort of going into sort of your early adult life, where were you sort of spiritually in the organization?
Oh, at that time I was struggling. I was really, really struggling. I remember when I was actually taking driving lessons from an elder in my congregation, and he came and met me outside my college once to give me a lesson. And I remember he asked me if I'm okay, because I looked a bit down, and I said, actually, I'm not okay. I said, I've come to realize that college is a real test spiritually, and I don't think I'm going to pass it. And you know, he did his best to encourage me and everything, but yeah, I didn't really do anything bad while I was at college. I mean, I went out with my friends drinking a few times, and I went to a couple of clubs, but other than that, I didn't really get myself into trouble from a JW standpoint. But things got better for me spiritually when I left college and started working. Yeah, things got better around that time, because I wasn't, you know, I wasn't with those associates anymore. And when I started working, I was like the youngest for years, for like well over 10 years. I was the youngest person in the office. So
yeah,
people I was working with, they weren't the type of people that I would hang out with outside of work.
Yeah.
So I had far fewer distractions spiritually once I started working. So after that, I got back on track spiritually.
So that maybe put a bit more emphasis on associating more with people in the congregation rather than associating with those outside.
That's right. Yeah.
So at this point, I believe you got married quite young, like myself, around the age of 20, 21, I believe.
21, yeah.
21, yeah. Very common theme amongst Jehovah's Witnesses. If you could go into sort of where you were, spiritually, but obviously in your personal life with your marriage, when did you sort of realize that, you know, I mean, you mentioned you made a mistake in terms of getting married. What led up to that, to you realizing that you were sort of trapped in a marriage, and you came to sort of this crossroads?
Boy, I mean, there were moments where I felt that I'd made a mistake, but I didn't feel trapped in the marriage until years later. I mean, right up until like the end of it, really. I only started feeling trapped towards the end of the marriage. But it was very, very turbulent. It was a very turbulent relationship almost from the very beginning, you know, for various different reasons. Not all of them to do with the whole witness thing.
No.
Some of it was my fault. Some of it was her fault. Some of it was just that we just weren't right for each other. Yeah. You know, that's the thing. I mean, it seems absolutely crazy to me now, but to think that two people can get married. So to think that believing the same thing or having the same religion is a strong basis for marriage is just absolutely ludicrous to me now. There are so much more important and fundamentally important things over and above that, but that's all the witnesses care about. You know, is she spiritual? Are you spiritual? You know, is he? And it's just ridiculous. That's not anything to base a marriage on.
No, absolutely. Religious beliefs and belief in a God and a belief system is not, as you said, a strong basis for a marriage. And I think there's a lot, especially in the last sort of 20 years or so, there's a huge spike in divorces, but especially in the JW religion, because like you said, people are getting married too young and then realizing they're not right for each other. And just because you've got the belief in Jehovah or the spiritual side of things in common, it's not enough, really, is it? It's not enough. You know, you can't marry someone because of their, you know, where they are in the congregation, if they're a pioneer or an elder or she's a very spiritual sister, because that will soon just wash off, really, isn't it? Like, you know, we can both, you know, give a testament to that, really.
Exactly.
So in terms of your marriage and where you are in your early 20s, where were you spiritually at this point in the organization?
I was never appointed. I was never a ministerial servant or an elder, but there were times where I actively tried to reach out for that again, because I felt that that's what was expected of me. You know, I was getting up in age now. Well, not up in age in real terms, but in terms of, you know,
spiritual
being
progression,
a man in the organization. You know, so I felt that it was expected of me. So there were times where I actively strived to do that, but I really struggled. Because when I got to, like, say, my mid-20s, I kind of started developing. I kind of wanted to be my own person, you know, rather than the person that I was supposed to be as a witness. And as you know, that's really incompatible with being a witness. So it's like those two things are always butting heads, you know, and everything that goes along with that. It creates a lot of difficulties in the organization. So, yeah, I had some really difficult times. But when I became a parent, when our first child was born, I started to look at the organization and, you know, the religion very, very differently. Because before that, I believed in Jehovah. I'd always believed in Jehovah, but I couldn't honestly say that I knew or understood him. But when I became a parent, there were a lot of things in the religion that started to click and make sense. And all of those things that I never quite figured out about Jehovah, didn't understand, I saw them from a parent's perspective, and I thought to myself, okay, so Jehovah's a parent.
Yeah.
That's why he makes this particular decision. That's why he acted like this in this situation, because he's a parent. So, and I kind of related to that. It didn't help me to progress any, but it did settle some of the niggling doubts that I had in my mind for a time, at least.
So what sort of doubts did you have at that particular moment in time?
The major one was, why is it wrong for two people to live together before getting married? Why is that wrong? And because Jehovah said so, just wasn't a good enough answer anymore.
Yeah.
It just wasn't a good enough answer, because the reason why I had that question was because of my own situation and the difficulties I was having in my marriage. I thought to myself, if we had lived together before getting married, all of these problems that we're having now, we would have already experienced them, and then we would have been able to make an informed decision as to whether or not it's a good idea for us to marry for the rest of eternity, not just for the rest of our lives, for the rest of eternity. Because in JW world, you know, you get married, you survive for Armageddon, you're together forever and ever and ever.
That's it. And you know, so, it's funny you mention that, because I've always wondered that myself. No sex before marriage, no living with someone before marriage. And they put a lot of emphasis on you choosing a marriage mate. You know, I've always been told it was the second most important decision you make in your life, aside from getting baptized, and where you want to end up spiritually in the organization. But then if you examine the criteria you've got in terms of a marriage partner, and then the rules you have to follow, you know, they call it courting, it's not dating, which I find quite cringeworthy.
Very.
But it's chaperoned at all times. Yeah. Like you said, you can't live with them. You can't have any sexual relations with them before marriage. It's a very difficult environment to get to know somebody with under these strict conditions. And you only really get to know that person, like you said, when you live with them. But at this point, to get to that stage, you've got to marry them. Yeah. So you do it backwards, don't you? You get married, and then you try and develop the relationship. But then it always doesn't work out, does it? Obviously, in our cases, it backfired.
It's like giving somebody a test under exam conditions, but you haven't allowed them to study the subject that they're being tested in.
Yeah.
You know, that, and I just couldn't see the wisdom in it. You know, I just could not see the wisdom in it. I wanted to know, why is this the best way to do it? But then, as I said, I became a parent and I started seeing Jehovah differently. It still didn't answer my question. I still had that question, but I just deferred it to Jehovah's wisdom. And I said, okay, sometimes I make decisions that my children don't understand, simply because they're not as wise or mature, as experienced as I am. But I want them to follow my decisions and my rules anyway, because it's what's best for them. And I just hope that they trust that I have their best interests at heart and do it even if they don't understand. So I put myself in a child's position, seeing Jehovah as the parent. So I still didn't have the answers to my questions, but I just said to myself, okay, Jehovah knows best. He's wiser than I am. I should just follow his direction the same way I expect my children to follow mine.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really answering anything. It was just putting it off, really.
Yes, which I had different issues, but I can totally relate to that, because I had a few things niggling the back of my mind for probably since I was about 15 or 16. One being, I always sort of go back to the Genesis account, and I wish there was a lot more dialogue in the Bible in the build up to Satan rebelling against Jehovah, because there's not really a lot of dialogue in there. No. And I've always wondered, looking at the structure from a JW perspective, you've got Jehovah, then you've got Jesus, then you've got spirit creatures, then you've got us as humans. So on an intelligence level, the spirit creatures are always more intelligent than us.
Yeah.
And Satan has witnessed Jehovah and Jesus do many magnificent things. He's got them, you know, can have direct conversation with them. But for Satan to still rebel and speak out against Jehovah and take a third of the angels with him, the guy must have had a point. You know, why would he sign his own death warrant? And I've always had questions like that, and I put them to like my dad and elders and stuff, and never answered. Just you need to focus on, you know, the preaching work, focus on the end coming and getting into the paradise. You don't need to worry about things like that. And like, again, you that thought, like you've just said, that thought process of having niggles in the back of your mind not being answered, just being left unanswered, kind of leads you to sort of where we are today, really, doesn't it? It's like, it's just delaying the process in terms of waking up from the religion.
But it's funny you should mention that particular question you had, because I had that as well. Yeah, that was one of my things. I mean, I was speaking to an elder about it once, and I said, Satan is supposed to be super, super intelligent. What makes him think he can win? Why, you know, what made him think that he could win against the Almighty? Yeah, because he's stupid.
He's signing his own death certificate, isn't he, by doing that? But he was still willing to do it.
Yeah, I said that he's supposed to be intelligent, but it seems pretty stupid to think that you can beat the Almighty in a war. You know, why did he rebel in the first place? Did he ever think he could seriously win? You know, and I never got a satisfactory answer, and it just never made sense.
Yeah,
you know,
because if you examine the Bible, the Genesis account, ideally is the most important passage of that Bible, because nothing else makes sense, really, does it? If you don't get your head around the Genesis account, and you've just got the creation passages and a small bit of dialogue where Satan tempts Adam and Eve, and for witnesses to make an informed decision, i.e. a life or death decision, to commit their life to it, to shun their family members over it. There's, like you said, there's not enough dialogue in there. Bill, what kind of conversation were Jehovah and Satan at the time? Because he was an angel at this point. I don't think he just woke up one day and that was it. He's Satan. He was still an angel at this point. There's not enough dialogue in there, really, to sort of make an informed decision, really. And I've always wondered that. But again, that was one of my sort of niggling questions that never got answered, really, by the brothers. It's funny, really, how you just get told in that mindset, oh, don't worry about that, you've got other things to focus on, leave that. It's always leave that in Jehovah's hands, isn't it? Leave it in Jehovah's capable hands, and they'll answer the questions when the time's right. But if we sort of get back to what's going on in your personal life, where you are, obviously in your marriage, where you are spiritually, where would you say things changed for you, A, in your marriage, and then B, in where you were with the organization?
Things changed around 2013. Marriage took a nosedive. The relationship just, started a steep decline around then. And the elders were involved in everything. And that's when I started to see things in the organization that just didn't sit right with me at all. The elder arrangement, the headship arrangement, I just saw massive flaws in the design, so to speak, to the way that things are set up. And the help that the elders tried to give wasn't help at all. It wasn't help at all. And I became extremely disillusioned with the religion then. I still believed it was the truth, but I had it's like watching a movie that you really enjoy, but at the same time you see massive plot holes in it.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say I was enjoying the truth, but I believed it was the truth, but I just saw massive holes that I just didn't know how to reconcile.
You were trying to endure.
Yeah. And I sought help from the elder. Oh, don't get me started on that word, endure. I hate that word. I grew to hate that word. Every single time I heard that word, endurance at the Kingdom Hall, it took everything for me to not get up and leave.
Yeah. Because
I just saw it as being an excuse. It was just a cop-out.
Yeah. Massive.
It's just a cop-out.
Yeah.
And I would go to the elders with problems and they would just tell me, oh, just endure. And I felt very, very marginalized and dismissed and, just fobbed off. So I started really, really hating that whole concept of endurance. And there were times at the meetings where I was completely tuned out. I got caught browsing Facebook a few times. I'll be just sitting there daydreaming, not listening whatsoever, kissing my teeth sometimes, like without even realizing it. I was just expressing my displeasure audibly. Just subconscious level without even realizing I was doing anything. So it went like that for quite a while, right up until 2019. Which is when my wife and I separated.
Yeah.
And for me, spiritually, things just got worse and worse and worse. I became very, very resentful of not just the elder arrangement, but resentful of Jehovah himself.
Yeah.
It's like, like when you've known someone all your life, but then you see a different side to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like I was seeing a different side to Jehovah, and it was one that I didn't like because, I got disfellowshipped in April of 2019, and I hold my hands up. I did the thing that I got disfellowshipped for.
Yeah.
Which I won't, rather not go too much.
No, you don't need to go into that. No.
I did the thing that I got disfellowshipped for, but I was accused of doing a whole load of other things as well that I 100% didn't do. And I know the elders were convinced that I did. But it's not that bothered me too much. It was the fact that Jehovah knew I didn't do those things. But he was still allowing for me to suffer the consequences as if I did do those things when I didn't. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Because it called up into question a whole load of other things, like, are the elders really led by Holy Spirit?
Yeah.
If Jehovah knows what the truth is, but he can't in some way communicate that to the elders, for them to know.
Yeah, that's always been a question in the back of my mind, the authenticity of the elder arrangement in terms of being appointed by Holy Spirit. That's never been a thing that's I've ever bought into, elders being appointed by Holy Spirit. But when they're there to make judicial decisions, I'm only going to paraphrase the Bible, but essentially the elders will say that Jehovah's already made the decision. It's just down to the Holy Spirit to get that decision from Jehovah down to the elders.
Exactly. That's exactly what they said to me during my judicial committee. You know, they said there's a scripture, things that are bound in heaven will also be bound on the earth. And that's what the explanation for it was.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not speaking about my case particularly, because as I said, I did the thing that I was disfellowshipped for. But since waking up, I've spoken to many, many people who were both disfellowshipped incorrectly or unjustly, and also reinstated wrongly.
Yeah.
You know, people who were either innocent or repentant but were still yet disfellowshipped, or people who were unrepentant and faking it and got reinstated.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, you know, the system must be broken somewhere if that happens.
It's funny you mentioned that, because that's how my brother got reinstated. He went into it in the interview I did with him, and he only went back to meetings and went through the reinstatement process just to have the contact back with the family. He was mentally out of the organization. He just wanted his family back, and essentially he was playing the system. He found a little loophole. Just go along with it, do your time at the meetings, underline the watchtower, and then when the time's right, just apply for reinstatement. He knew all the spiel, as he says. And he'll even say to you today, in the back of his mind, when he was at that reinstatement meeting, he was like, if I get reinstated here, there's no way Jehovah's real, because Jehovah can read hearts. And in his heart, he didn't believe it. He was just faking it. He just wanted his family back. And the elders come back and reinstated him. And then the very next meeting, he was gone and stopped going to meetings.
Yeah.
You know, so that reaffirmed in his mind. And like you've just mentioned, seeing that, you know, it's not the only case. What is the authenticity there of the Holy Spirit and the disfellowship and in the reinstatement arrangement? It makes zero sense, does it?
It doesn't make any sense, because you're always told that you can fool men, but you can't fool Jehovah.
Yeah.
You know, so, but from what you just explained, it's all about just fooling men. It's all about just getting those three men to believe what it is that you're saying. Jehovah's not involved in the process at all.
No.
I mean, and your brother's experience isn't unique. I mean, I saw an experience of a woman who got reinstated, went to the meeting and waited for, you know, it to be announced that she was reinstated. As soon as the meeting was finished, right out of the door, hasn't been back since, with a big smile on her face. She just wanted to get reinstated so she could speak to people again. You know,
it's sad the lengths that you've got to go to do that, but then at the same time you're validating, you know, how, what's the word that I'm looking for, you're validating in your own mind, like we've said, the Holy Spirit arrangement is null and void. There isn't any authenticity to it. There's no backing whatsoever from Jehovah. You said, it's just about fooling men, really. And if you can fool them, then like people do on the other side, they can fool men and not get disfellowshipped. But then people get disfellowshipped completely unjustly. So I think it's down to the discretion of the elders more than anything. I think we've established that.
Exactly. It's just it's a man-made process, the whole thing.
Yeah, very controlling process. So where you're at then at this point, you're starting to wake up. You have separated from your wife. Where would you say you started with the waking up process? You've seen the injustice in the elders arrangement, but did you, at this point, were you questioning your beliefs at all, or did you still have a fundamental belief in God or Jehovah?
I still had a belief in God at the time. I still definitely had a belief in God. I made up my mind that I didn't want to worship him anymore.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like this new side to him that I was seeing, this new unjust side, but I still believed that he was real. And there were times where I just wanted to understand why things go the way they go, if he's a God of justice and if he's real and fair and all of that. And so for a long time after that, I would still occasionally pray. It wouldn't be, to give praise.
No.
It would be to give him peace of my mind, really.
Yeah. Element of hope for yourself, really. Yeah.
I just wanted to understand. I was like, help me make it make sense. So I didn't really start questioning whether or not Jehovah was real at that stage. That came, much later down the line. But the whole COVID situation really made me feel like the end was near. That this was the Great Tribulation, or the start of the Great Tribulation. That was around January 2020, and that caused me a lot of, psychological trauma. I went to bed and had nightmares every single night during that time.
Wow!
But it wasn't until June of 2020 that I started looking at XJW content and websites, and that just I'm telling you, within a week, I had woken up.
Yeah. I mean, just before we go into that, what you're saying is a battle in itself, isn't it, really? Clicking the play button on your first, or just searching XJW stuff online.
I had a very full-on anxiety attack.
Yeah.
I had a full-on anxiety attack when I decided that I was going to go onto YouTube and specifically look for XJW videos. I had a full-on anxiety attack. My pulse was racing, my heart was pounding out of my chest, I was sweating, my hands were shaking. I felt like I was doing something that was literally going to give me a death sentence.
Yes. Yeah. You've got the disfellowshipped label, and then it's like apostates or viewing apostate material is still like the scum essentially of the organization. In terms in their terminology. So you obviously in June, I think you believe you set your channel up. What was your inspiration to get into YouTube activism or XJW activism?
It was seeing all of I never decided that I was going to be an activist. I just wanted to put my story out there in the hopes that it would help somebody in the same way that I had been helped by stories that I had seen. I'd seen so many that made such a deep and profound impression on me. I just wanted to pay it forward. So that's why I set up my channel and uploaded my first video.
Yeah. When your channel, when it's taken off really well, it's there's a lot of good content on there. I mean, I stumbled across your channel not long before I got into it myself. I mean, I first saw your experience on Lloyd's channel when you did an interview with him, and there was a few videos you posted aside from your story of leaving and waking up from the organization. One that stuck out to me was the Respect Your Rapist watchtower you did a rebuttal on. I never knew that article ever existed, and just watching that short 14 or 15 minute video was a real eye-opening experience, for me, because like you, I've been raised in the truth. But it's amazing how there's so many watchtowers out there that we don't know about yet. Like, they've got so many watchtowers they've printed over the decades, and if we had time to sit and read every single one of them, I think it'd be quite amazing to find, compared to the teaching they've got now and what they were teaching 20, 30, 40 years ago, is quite incredible. So you've got your channel. Obviously, we've both been raised in the truth, and we've got obviously a bit of background about your way out of the organization. But whilst I've got you on here, I really wanted to go into how you think and how we think the organization is going to survive long term, but how it's evolved over the decades. So obviously your youth in the organization was, I believe, like the 80s, 90s,
Yeah,
etc.
80s,
Yeah.
90s, yeah.
And I'm late 90s, early 2000s. What would you say has changed massively in the organization from the 80s to, say, where they were up to pre-COVID?
Definitely the biggest thing that stands out to me is the focus on indoctrinating children.
Yeah.
I mean, there'd always been material about children, but it was mostly directed towards parents on how to raise their children, according to the organization's doctrines.
Yeah.
But there wasn't such a focus on directly speaking to children. I mean, there were a couple of books aimed at young people, like before the Young People Ask book, there was the youth book, which was like a pink or red book. Excuse me. And there was a book called Listen to the Great Teacher. That was pink. The youth book was red. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the Question Young People Ask book came out. But there wasn't the huge amount of stuff that there is now, especially like on the jw.org website. Caleb and Sophia videos of the series of articles that are aimed at young people. It just wasn't like that. And at the time, when I was still a witness, I thought that this was a good thing. I thought that this was an evidence of, Jehovah through his organization looking after us and looking after our children. But in light of the organization's decline in their stagnated growth and then eventual decline in growth for the first time since the 70s, I see that in a different light now. Excuse me.
That's right.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about that. Yeah,
that's right. So
in terms of the organization's decline, I see all of that in a completely different light. I think it's because the organization, the governing body, have been seeing this come for a very long time. I think they've been seeing the stagnation of the organization's growth. It's been on a cast for a long time, and they've turned their focus towards children intentionally as a means of counteracting that.
Yes.
They know that the ministry isn't working in terms of bringing in converts. So they're turning their attention towards the children.
Yeah.
As a means of
exactly
as a means of keeping their numbers.
Yeah, I think if we examined the percentage of those who got baptized last year, I think you've hit the nail on the head. The majority or the overwhelming majority will be born-ins. I think that's the only way the organization is going to survive.
No doubt in my mind whatsoever. I mean, they raved about 300,000 got baptized, and it's the highest number of baptisms in 20 years. But they're very, very tight-lipped about how many people had left the organization. So that it's spin. It's something that JWs are very, very adept at on an organizational level and also on an individual level as well, is distorting facts.
Yes.
Something that JT on the XJW Critical Thinkers channel says is that numbers don't lie, but it's possible to lie with numbers.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's exactly what the organization done with that 300,000 figure. I'm not doubting that 300,000 people got baptized.
Yeah,
but I think the spin that they're putting on it is to is to like try and say, oh, the organization is growing, we're experiencing growth. You're not experiencing growth. What is the net result of people coming in versus people going out?
Yeah.
And that's where the real truth is.
And then, like I said, of those 300,000, how many of those 300,000 are people who are an age where they're capable of making an informed decision in terms of understanding the complete implications of what it's like and what it is going to be like to be a Jehovah's Witness.
Exactly.
i.e. the age category. And I think, the overwhelming majority has got to be born in.
Exactly.
It's an interesting point you make, that really, about the Caleb and Sophia videos and the real focus on children. That's a really good point.
And it's not just a focus on children, it's a focus on getting children baptized at an increasingly younger age as well.
Yeah.
And it's a trap. At the end of the day, it's a trap. Get them baptized as quickly as possible, and then you've got them, because they, if they want to leave, they lose their friends and family. So it's nothing more than a trap. Yeah.
I mean, developing that, like that narrative you got there about, the young ones and the real focus on the young ones. I mean, there's lots that's changed over the decades in the organization. I think it's starting to lose the community aspect. When I was young, we used to do a lot of variety shows and things like that, and there was a real community aspect about doing a lot with brothers and sisters outside of the congregation. And you'd have your typical witness dues where we'd hire the local village hall, and then can you bring the sausage rolls, can you bring fizzy drink, can you bring the sweets, and etc. The typical witness dues. I think they're losing that element slightly, even pre-COVID. But what I think has been a very detrimental feature of their downfall is JW broadcasting. Because prior to that, especially for me growing up, and I'm sure it's the same for you, we would only see a couple of pictures a year of the governing body. We'd never see what they were like, visually. We just have a couple of pictures and a letter from them from once or twice a year. They were very much behind the scenes. But since they've launched JW broadcasting, I can remember when that came out and my parents absolutely raved about it. But I can't take Stephen Lett seriously or Anthony Morris for various reasons. But I think, like Lloyd touches on, they can kind of hide the watchtowers over the decades because people just won't pick them up. But what they're saying now about the COVID situation, about the persecution in Russia and how close we are to the end, people are going to be digging these videos up in 40 years time and be going, we're still waiting. This is what was said 40 years ago. You've got video footage of the governing body. So I think they can be held more accountable to the wild claims that they've made.
Absolutely.
But I think JW broadcasting has been a good thing for them in their organization in terms of trying to keep the membership in, but I think it's also having a detrimental effect at the same time because, for me as well, I couldn't take Stephen Lett or Anthony Morris seriously. No. And then how cringeworthy some of the content they are putting out, i.e. like the Caleb and Sophia videos, like their anti-gay. I remember when that came out, the anti-gay one. And Sophia showed her mum the picture of somebody that drawn at school, and she's got two mums. It's quite disgusting, really, what they expose the children to. For us, or for me, I had the Bible stories book, and that's bad enough on its own. But with the way the videos have gone, it is quite extraordinary, really. So obviously COVID's hit, and obviously the witnesses have had to adapt with their meeting arrangement. There's been no ministry. What do you think the future of the organization is going to look like once we come out of the pandemic?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I can't say either way whether or not they'll go back to the Kingdom Hall or they'll just keep everything on Zoom. I mean, they're still continuing with their program of selling Kingdom Halls. Whether that will be, a total selling of all the buildings, I don't know. I mean, there are pros and cons either way.
Yeah.
But if they do go back to the Kingdom Halls, I'm convinced that attendance will be nowhere near as high as pre-COVID.
Yeah.
it won't even be as high as it currently is on Zoom.
No.
Because there are so many people who are just mentally out of the organization, and Zoom makes it easier for them to still technically be counted as witnesses without having to do very much.
Mm-hmm.
If that ever, if that facility is ever gone, and you're expected to be present in person at the Kingdom Hall, I don't know how many of them are going to want to commit themselves to that.
Yeah, I think it's going to look a lot different structurally once they do come out of it. But
yeah,
touching on, like you said, in terms of the majority of those currently getting baptized versus those going out, I personally feel the main reason for that, or a big driving force for that, is the internet.
Yeah.
Because obviously when we were younger, it wasn't as widely available. But now I'd say the last 10, 15 years, the internet is really becoming more widely available. More people are speaking out on YouTube, writing vlogs, on things like Reddit, etc. There's an array of information, but also children have phones and tablets now, don't they? So for Jehovah's Witness parents to try and police every single moment of them using those devices and what they're doing, it's going to be quite difficult. But in terms of breaking that cycle of generations of witness, I think it's going to be a gradual process. But I think whether it happens in our lifetime or not, it will be interesting to see what the future looks like.
I think as an organization, the days are definitely numbered. But at the same time, I don't think that necessarily means that we will soon see the end of Jehovah's Witnesses.
No.
I think the Jehovah's Witnesses as a religion will be around. They could be around for the next 100 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the organization as it stands now, with the governing body and JW Broadcasting and all of that, especially since they're getting so much more media attention now. The cases of child abuse and things like that, it's hitting them financially too.
Well, how do you think they're going to cope long term? Because the cases are just going to keep rolling in. They're only going to have so much money.
Exactly.
To keep.
I think they've shot themselves in the foot with building this new media center as well. I think that's going to end up being a financial burden and a money pit. So it's like they're fighting a war on two fronts, which is never a good idea. I mean, that never ever leads to victory.
I think as well, the new light teaching, how long can they keep that going? Because I can remember a few conventions where I think it was 2010 or 2011, where they went into the iron in the clay prophecy that Daniel made, and they brought new light out then at that convention. They used the evidence of Britain and America having coalitions at that point as evidence for that. But 10 years has passed. And I got sent a Watchtower article from 1974 as well. And it was dealing with the levels that family members should shun disfellowshipped ones. I mean, I'm going to do a video on it anyway. But it clearly stated in there that it's none of the elders' business, essentially, on how much contact that family members have. They even said it. They went as far to say it's that person's right, to come round to their parents or their family members' house to see how they're doing. They were just more worried about the spiritual fellowship. That's what they needed to have no contact with over. So it's amazing how from 1974, you've got it in black and white. Saying you can have contact with your family, but no spiritual fellowship. And you fast forward to 2021, and it's shun them at all costs. So how long they can keep that new light teaching going, that I think is going to be quite interesting. How long can people keep going on with it's new light? What's it going to look like in 10 years? once COVID's gone and the end still hasn't come, and Russia, I mean, what's going to happen in Russia? What do you think the future is there for the organization in Russia?
Yeah. I mean, as far as New Light goes as a doctrine, I think potentially it's something that they could keep up indefinitely. Because when your membership is made up of people who are indoctrinated, you don't have to make sense. You can speak as much nonsense as you like, and people will just accept it because they're indoctrinated into it. They're not following along with you or believing you because what you're saying makes sense. So if you don't make sense, it's no big deal. So potentially I think they could carry on with New Light indefinitely. Where I think it could be like the death blow is if they make a prediction that they can't then walk back afterwards out of necessity. Like, say for instance, at the start of the Great Tribulation, the message of hope of the new system and all of that is going to change according to witness theology. The message will change into one of judgment. So it won't be like, we're here to bring you good news. It's like, we're here to tell you you're all doomed. If they ever make the announcement that they've switched that message, and then years pass and then there's no Great Tribulation and no Armageddon, trying to walk that back would finish them. I reckon. I
think that's a very, very good point you make, but I think for them to make that statement, that's going to take a lot of thought process, really, isn't it?
I don't think they ever will.
No.
I'm just saying, if they ever did, and it never happened, they couldn't then walk it back. And if they tried, you would see a mass exodus, like similar to what happened in the 70s.
I think
after 1975,
they've been very close, especially with Stephen Lett saying we're in the final part of the last days. So they go in 99% of the way there, but they're not going to go, like you said, full cycle and go, right, it's a message of judgment now. It's not a message of peace and hope. It's, you're going to be judged. You're going to be exterminated.
I don't think they will ever, but they'll be too cautious. I don't think they will ever make that, or say that.
Do you think the governing body actually buy into their theology? Do you think they fully believe it, or do you think there's an element with each of them or some of them that it's like a business model for them? They're just they're these men just controlling people, but behind closed doors that they know it's all a load of rubbish.
I don't think any of them believe it 100%. I don't think any of them believe it 100%. Some of them are more heavily indoctrinated and deluded than others. There may even be one or two that don't believe it at all. I don't think it's a black and white. I don't think there's a black and white answer to that. And the thing is that they're all so different in their characters as well. I mean, some are more eccentric than others. Some come across as being creepier than others. That Garrett Loesch, as far as I'm concerned, he's the closest thing you can get to a real life Bond villain. All he needs is a white cat. He's just the most sinister person. He comes across as being so sinister. If there's any of them that don't believe it at all and they're just in it for the power and the manipulation, my money is on him.
I think for me, like I've mentioned, I couldn't take Stephen Lett seriously for the obvious reasons. But with Anthony Morris, I think he's got a very, very dark side. I think he's
absolutely.
He's heavily fixated on blood and death and punishment. And I think he would take joy in exterminating people like us. He's really got a fixation on death and punishment, which is kind of creepy. Because even though that's part of their theology, you know, the Bible says Jehovah doesn't want to destroy anybody. Jehovah won't take delight in doing that. But then you listen to what comes out of Anthony Morris's mouth, in terms of how much blood and gore he likes to spill out of his mouth. And then you've got the tight pants, and he's very homophobic as well. I think he's a very, he's mentally messed up. I think, you know, he's definitely got some issues. He's battling with. And then Samuel Hurd I remember listening to his comment he made about women having smaller brains than men.
Yeah. And
they can just make these wild claims, and then nobody questions it. Like they can just get away with it. So it is quite interesting to see where they're going to end up and what the new governing body members are going to look like. Because, as you know, it's a fact of life. We all die. So these men are going to die at some point. So I wonder who their successors are going to be and what they're like to the governing body. I mean, that in itself, like, what do you have to do to qualify to be a member of the governing body, apart from being anointed? You know, what have you got to do to be appointed there? Again, going back into that elders arrangement, the Holy Spirit. And obviously his latest video on the COVID situation, and then the exploitation of 150, I think, members of the Russian Jehovah's Witnesses in prison.
Actually, I think it's one of the others that's the newest one. Kenneth Cook.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
Kenneth Cook.
Yeah. I totally forgot about him. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's the newest one.
So it'd be quite interesting to see what the leadership's going to look like, you know, in the future, because they are getting, some of them are getting quite old, so they're not going to be around forever. And whether they go to their grave and get away with so much they've got away with the past couple of decades, with the shunning arrangement, the splitting up of families, the people refusing blood transfusions, the cover up of child abuse. The organisation, I think it is going to struggle, but like you said, I think it's going to be a long process. I think it's going to be a steady decline in numbers. But at least there's a decline. That's that's good for us. Personally, it's nice to see people are starting to wake up. From the indoctrination side of things, but it's about breaking that cycle of born-ins. I think that's going to be the toughest thing. But I think that's always going to be a thing. But I think that will, just like you said, that's going to gradually decrease as time goes on. With the organisation. So. But it's been great to get you onto the channel, Riley.
Thank you for having me. Enjoyed it.
It's been an absolute privilege to get you on. Please like this video. Please subscribe to the Shunned Experience channel, and also subscribe to Jexit 2020. Thank you very much for watching, viewers.